Our world has really come a long way in the last 150 years. I mean, think about it. Prior to 150 years ago, the scientific community, they actually believed that living organisms like mice and maggots, they just spontaneously appeared out of thin air from rotten hay and meat. People thought illnesses came from invisible, bad-smelling clouds of poison. Surgeons operated with dirty hands and equipment, and they would actually come to surgery with stained and bloody aprons because they felt like it was a sign of their experience and their expertise. It was around this time that a trip to the hospital for something as simple as a broken bone, it left the victim with less than a 50% chance of survival because you had mysterious infections that just randomly came out of nowhere. And doctors, they honestly didn't think they could do anything about it. This was a world where just the mention of tiny and undetectable organisms like bacteria and viruses, if you had said anything about those, you would have gotten ridiculed and laughed out of the room. Now, obviously things are different today. With the invention and the advancement of the microscope, we now know better. Simple things like germs and hand washing, they're so common to us today that it's hard to picture a time when people were actually ignorant of them. But there was a moment. There was a moment where notions like these, they were so revolutionary and they were so life-altering that people actually fought against them and pushed back on them. You see, we as humans, we all have a tendency, I think, to build our lives on foundational ideas about life. And when those ideas are demolished by the wrecking ball of a new reality, it's never a comfortable place to be. And yet it's our willingness as humans to allow our misguided mentalities to be torn down in order to make room for new, redefined realities. That's what makes progress and growth possible. Our ability to accept new truth and then live in light of that truth. It's what shatters the glass ceiling of what is possible in the future. I mean, just look at the unbelievable things that have taken place in the field of medical technology since microbiology was introduced. Now, without a doubt, the greatest wrecking ball of truth that this world has ever known or will ever know is Jesus of Nazareth. You see, like a microscope, Jesus shed light on a spiritual reality that our human eyes had previously been blinded to. And as a wrecking ball of divine truth, I mean, he smashed to pieces all of the false misconceptions that we as people thought were real. Through his life and death and resurrection, Jesus revealed all the misguided ways that we as humans, that we viewed God, that we view ourselves, that we view each other. It was through his teaching and his description of a kingdom that centered on the character and nature of God that Jesus revealed just how backwards the world we live in is. And not only that, but Jesus, he created a new reality which has the potential to not only redefine our present situation, but provide unimaginable hope for the future. That's what the first couple of chapters of Colossians have been all about. And now we enter Colossians 3. And Colossians 3 presents us with a question, and it's this: which reality are you and I going to choose to live in? Will we continue to maintain loyalty to a perspective of life that's been revealed to be completely wrong and outdated? Or are we willing to accept and live in the new reality that Jesus has made known to us and given us access to? Paul, he ended Colossians 2 with the question: if you died with the Messiah to the elemental forces of this world, then why do you still live as if you belong to the world? And he builds on that question in chapter 3 by saying, so if you've been raised with the Messiah, seek what is above, where the Messiah is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on what is above, not on what is on the earth. For you have died and your life is hidden with the Messiah in God. When the Messiah, who is your life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with him in glory. So, in other words, if I can paraphrase Paul, what I get from that is there are two ways of looking at life. As people, we can seek the things of earth, or we can set our hearts and minds on things above where Jesus reigns as King. Now, setting our hearts and minds on the things of earth, the Bible is very clear, it will eventually destroy us. Proverbs 14:12 says that there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. I look at it kind of like how people used to see medicine, right? Their logic and theories about medicine, it seemed right to them, but the results of living out what they perceived to be reality, it just led to a whole lot of death. And I feel like the same principle proves true in how you and I approach life in general and see life in general. I mean, on our own, our perception of the world, it's flawed and it's limited. We don't see things correctly. Our feelings, our instincts, our thoughts on life, they cannot be trusted because they lie a lot. They sound good to us, but really only lead to destructive behavior. Paul, in Colossians 3, he lists out things like sexual immorality and lust and evil desires and greed and anger and slander. He talks about the abuse and misuse of our words to deceive and contaminate not only ourselves, but those around us. And I don't have time to go into the depth with all of these things, but I just want to look at maybe one of these and see how this truth plays out of our false realities playing out into destruction. Let's just take sexual immorality, for example. The Greek word right here for sexual immorality refers to any sex outside of marriage. And I could tell you, as someone who is around young people a lot and works with them on a daily basis, the thought of saving sex for marriage, it's a viewpoint that is viewed as restrictive and harsh and archaic and really ridiculous. But for a minute, let's just think about this from God's perspective. Now, without getting too graphic, the Bible describes sex as the highest physical expression of emotional closeness that a person can experience, because this is why it involves two people that leave themselves completely unguarded and vulnerable. It's the act of completely entrusting yourself to another person, and it was an extraordinary gift that God gave people that He reserved for the lifelong commitment of marriage. So let me ask, when you receive a special gift, how do you normally treat it? I remember one Christmas, I got inspired and I wrote Sherry a poem. And I'm not talking about roses are red, violets are blue. I'm talking about a heartfelt 10-stanza poem that outlines really the progression of our relationship. And I poured myself into this thing. And when I finished, I printed it up in fancy script and put it on special paper, and I placed it in a shadow box, and I spent days decorating it. It meant a lot to me, and I feel like based on how Sherry responded, it meant a lot to her too. It hangs in our bedroom. Now, I just want you to think for a moment. Imagine that if I came home one day and I found the shadow box opened up, the poem was gone, but I see the paper that the poem was printed on lying on the counter, except it's flipped over, and there's a grocery list on there, there's some scratch writing, and when I asked Sherry about it, she tells me that she needed something to write on and she couldn't find any available paper, so that was the easiest thing to access. How do you think I would feel? Now obviously, Sherry has not done that, would never do that, because she knows that would be, first of all, soul-crushing for me, but you don't cheapen what's special by using it for something that's common. But has the world not done that with sex? The world has stripped it of its specialness. Instead of a gift that brings real value to another person, it's been turned into a weapon that dehumanizes people. Instead of bringing someone into completion and fulfillment, as far as just restoring and fulfilling a relationship, It's a force that brings chaos to people's lives. You know, buying into the world's standards, this is just one example of how it brings destruction. And the truth is, we all buy into these false realities. We all battle with misguided feelings and instincts and thoughts on life that they seem sensible to us, but they can't be trusted. And it doesn't help that we get just inundated with this from the world around us all the time. So what do? Paul tells us, put to death what belongs to your worldly nature, that you and I, we once walked in these things. We once lived in these things, but we have put that old self off. We have put on a new self. And he says we are being renewed in the knowledge according to the image of the Creator. If you and I know that the world's way of thinking is wrong, if we know that it leads to destruction, and if we also know that we still have a tendency to revert back to our old way of seeing things, then there's only one answer. And Paul says we have to put to death the backwards thinking of the world. And here's how we do that: by seeing proper reality. We do this by recognizing Jesus as our life and setting our hearts and our minds on things above where He is. That's reality. In other words, it means setting your mind on His kingdom, because the truth is that everything in this life is moving towards kingdom life. Like the microscopic world that we used to be ignorant of. This was a spiritual realm of reality that we used to be oblivious to. But now, because of Jesus, we've been made aware of it. We have a choice to not only live like it's there, but to actually live in that reality. We as followers of Jesus, we have a choice that we once didn't have, but we still have to make the choice. And it's something that we must decide over and over in each moment that we live in, that we're going to be renewed like the image of the Creator, that we'll set our hearts and minds on the truth of things above, on the truth that Jesus is King. Are we going to do that? I mean, that's the choice in front of us. Or are we going to settle? Settle for the emptiness of a world that's been shown to be on its way out, on a world that brings destruction. And see, for Paul, it was a no-brainer. You and I, we have died to the false reality of this world, and we've been given a new reality. And so he tells us, start being true to who you really are. And the only way that you and I are going to do this is by continually setting our hearts and minds on things above and rooting ourselves and our reality